Hello, everybody. It is your host, KG82 Live, aka the Ball Brawlers. We are here for the final regular season YarskCap for the people. As you obviously see from the group text earlier, my co-host Zach isn't able to be here. He's busy focused on trying to get a win this week and securing that bye. I know he missed the bye last week because he oversaw staff and he wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be the same mistake that he made this year. So he is on top of his game. Couldn't take any time out for the pod, but that's okay. We'll keep trucking solo, and hopefully we can get him on next week. And we'll just kind of see. Maybe Kyler broke his spirit after that Monday night garbage time touchdown, but you know what? Sometimes the Yars Cop's got to move on. So with that in mind, we'll try to keep it a little bit shorter, but still try to give you guys a little bit of info, just because we always hear questions, hey, why isn't the pod up? So apparently people are still listening. So we do appreciate that. Um, Quick kind of recap just on last week's matchup. And if I'm talking too much or see my eyes flaring around, it's because I'm going solo. So you're going to have to deal with it. But last week's matchups, there's really two matchups that I kind of highlighted. One was decided Sunday night and one Monday night. So first, the Sunday night matchup between Kyler and Ross that got decided. So kudos to Kyler's team. I mean, he's pulled out the win. Jonathan Taylor, obviously trading away Deontay and Eckler is hard, but Jonathan Taylor's been the number one overall running back since you trade him away, and he got exactly what he traded for. He hasn't fell off the wagon, which I initially thought he would against some of these tough defenses, but he's proven to be matchup proof. And so Luddy's got the best player in fantasy, which if you look at past champions, you need the elite running back, and he's got it. So it was nice, I think, for Ross's team to get Kyler Murray back. He dropped a 30 burger in the worst weather possible. If that was any better weather, Kyler probably actually scores more points, and he might actually get the win this week. But still good signs for weeks to come. And Ross has got to like his team getting in a little bit better shape, but hopefully, obviously, some other injuries to Swift and Debo can help make his team a little bit more well-rounded. But we'll kind of touch base on that when we get to the power rankings. But the other matchup was the Monday night matchup, which took into account the absolute crazy wins, which unfortunately really didn't give Bill much of a chance from the start because Josh Allen really wasn't throwing the ball and neither team was. And that was a recipe for success for Damian Harris and Saps players. But major kudos to Sap because a few weeks ago with the Devontae Adams trade, he got George Kittle and Damian Harris, and they accounted for 52 of his 107 total points. And so he traded away one player, Devontae Adams, which was on a bye last week, which wouldn't be able to help him against Bill. But the two players he got back scored him damn near half of his points. And he also got to avoid the bye of Damian Harris for a trade we'll talk about shortly. So major kudos to Sap. Bill's team obviously is battered with injuries with CMC going down, but had a nice game from Miles Sanders. But I know they're on the bye this week, and hopefully he'll be healthy on the way back. But barring a crazy scenario, it sounds like Bill will be in the Sacco joining Jared and two other teams. So more to come on that and see what kind of all goes from there. But with that in mind, I guess we'll touch base on potentially the last trade of the season between Seth and I. I sent him a deal that gave him DJ Moore, and I got in return Damian Harris. So kind of a quick, easy trade. Wasn't too much to it. Luckily, in my position, I've secured a buy. And so I'm able to look at other teams that are trying to get a win this week. And it's like, hey, if they have a player on buy, maybe I'll trade somebody like a DJ Moore, who I don't think I'll play in the playoffs because I like the three head of wide receiver of Waddle, Deontay Johnson, and Justin Jefferson. So DJ Moore wouldn't have a chance of playing any week for me in the playoffs. Whereas Damian Harris, who is on a bye this week, so he does Sap no good. DJ Moore would help his team potentially get a win this week. And I can wait for Damian Harris because he's got a really juicy matchup in week 17, I believe against the Texans or Jaguars. But either way, it's a team where you assume that the Patriots will be running the ball heavy, and he potentially could be a nice spot start in a championship week matchup because I'm pretty much looking at a 2-week window. So fingers crossed it works out for me. I thought it was a decent deal for both teams, and it gets, I guess my general thought is try to find a three-pack of running backs and receivers, so you can kind of have depth if an injury comes up. Damian obviously has the hamstring injury, but I don't play for another this week and next week technically for anything, so I can be patient and wait for him. And so that's the one kind of big trade that happened. But with that in mind, I think our next item that we kind of want to touch base on is the power rankings. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen really quick with the people. And so just to clarify, these are what we project the final standings to be. So I know I sent out the preliminary text yesterday or 2 days ago, depending on when you're listening, but I haven't vetted it, but I feel fairly confident and my scenarios outlined. And so similar to what we've done in the past, this is solely a projection of what we think the final end of season standings are going to be. And so it's pretty much just, hey, where are the standings now and what do we project with next week's results? So with that in mind, the 10 spot, we already have locked and loaded. It will be going to Jared. He will be battling in the Sacco playoffs. Who I have him matched up against, I have built in the 9 slot. Right now, he has the second worst record in the league. He plays my team, which still have an outside shot at it, but I just don't think his team is in the strongest position. In the 8 slot, I have Shane. So I liked Shane's move to potentially get DJ Moore this week, but he's facing Pooty, who admittedly isn't on his best week in terms of matchups and everything, but I still think Pootie's team is one of the top teams in the league, and it'll be interesting to see if Javonte and Gordon are healthy again, if he'll still get the same kind of run in with that Javonte had last week, but we'll just have to wait and see with that. And in the 7 spot, the last person missing the playoffs, I have Schultes. And so this is an interesting one because obviously it implies that I think Josh is actually going to beat Kyler this weekend. And it's solely because I think Kyler's hitting a really tough week in terms of buys, if I recall correctly. I'm seeing if I can pull it up quick. I think Kyler has. So yeah, he has. That's exactly. It was Jonathan Taylor's on a buy this week, which is Kyler's horse, his stallion, and so that makes things a little difficult. Russell Wilson's playing Houston, which you would think is a great matchup for him, but it also could be a recipe for them running the ball a lot, and not because Houston's so dog shit that Russell Wilson might not need to do much. But overall, Kyler has a decent team. I worry about Marquise Brown just because the whole Ravens passing game has been really lackluster lately. As a Lamar Jackson and owner, I unfortunately know that, but there's only really so much you can truly do. And I just think Josh, with his running backs that he has, he's going to pull out a win this week, which is going to get him the tiebreaker over Schultes in the end. So in the 6th spot, I have Mr. Axman, who wins the tiebreaker over Schultes, but loses it to next on the list, Mr. Roscoe Dash. So Roscoe has been kind of well documented last week how he's been battling injuries. Debo may be back this week, which would be huge, and DeAndre Swift, still no firm timetable on when he'll return. So it'll be interesting to see how his team recovers and kind of just proceed from there because it's hard to truly gauge his team outside of that. In the 4 slot, I have Luddy. So this one is solely a relation to what I think is going to happen next week. And with Jonathan Taylor on a bye, I have Luddy losing this week to Axe's team. And this is in no way reflecting of how I think the most dangerous teams in the final playoffs are. It's just how I think the final standings will be. Because I think if Kyler has Jonathan Taylor, he wins this week, and Axe would be on the outside looking in. So good break for Axe, and we'll see what comes to fruition. In the number 3 spot, I have Mr. Pudence. So with him, I project beating Shane this week. He would have an 8-6 record similar to Kyler. And with the tiebreakers, I think it just goes down to points scored. And so that would get Pooty the edge for the 3 slot. Overall, really solid team for Pooty, like we've said all year long. There's small concerns in terms of James Robinson, and just because you never know with Urban Meyer what he's going to do. And so hopefully it all works out and they actually give him a good workload. But one fumble by Robinson, and then he might be sitting the rest of the game. The other I'm to potentially worry about, DK Metcalf hasn't looked the same, and Javonte Williams, who I guess I know in other leagues I've tried to trade for all year, not necessarily in our league because I know Pootie's holding on to him and Melvin Gordon. But if Melvin Gordon is to come back, do they no longer have is Javonte no longer the absolute elite running back? Is he now in the timeshare and just going to get 10 to 12 points, which is good as a flex, but is that what he really wants out of him? And it's just going to be interesting to see what kind of comes to fruition. But with the two-headed monster of Mixon and Cup and the stack of Herbert and Keenan Allen, I think Pootie is well destined in the long run to be a legitimate title shot. In the number 2 slot, I have Mr. Zachariah Earlbeck. So not much change here at the top. He's been battling a lot of injuries. It's going to be interesting to see what unfolds with Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones coming back, because the one somewhat blessing for Zach is since Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones have been out, Madison and A.J. Dillon have taken the full workload for their team and have done amazingly well. So the problem with Dalvin and Aaron Jones coming back is they're now splitting the workload, and there's no guarantee on how one's going to produce over the other. Aaron Jones had his first game back a few weeks ago, and Zach started him, rightfully so, over A.J. Dillon, but they ended up just giving A.J. Dillon a majority of the work regardless, and it makes it a lot tougher start-sit decisions. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but we still have him in the 2 slot getting the bye. And currently, as in some weeks, same as Roscoe's ranking last week, I have myself the number 1 seed. Since Derrick Henry's team's went down for the season, I've still luckily been able to turn things around, scored the most points last week, and the trade with Kyler hurt losing Jonathan Taylor, but really helped round out my team with Deontay Johnson starting as my wide receiver 2, and Eckler still getting the job done. So right now, I still have myself in the 1 seed. It's nice to have the bye locked in, but that's kind of that. And one thing I did kind of want to note, just because if this potentially could be the last pod if we don't get a co-host next week, give everyone a slight insight to what I think the final projections in terms of, hey, here's what the standings are going to end, but what do we think the playoffs are going to result in? And so one of the things I am taking into account is, since Zach and I have the bye, that's one less chance for us to lose. So with that implied addition to our teams, like, hey, we only need to win 2 games to win the championship. All the other teams in the Yarsky would need 3. I have the top 2 teams similar here, where I have myself and Zach in the top 2 slots to potentially take home the title. In the 3rd spot, I actually, in a surprising move, I know we've talked how much we love Pootie's team, but I'm actually going to give Luddy's team the bump to the number 3 spot. Actually, no, I forgot. There was 2 spots that I flip-flopped a million times, and I thought I had Luddy and Fred Pootie on my initial ranking, and I did one last sweep. The only reason I changed these two, I'm leaving these 2 the same, and Pootie 1 spot ahead of Luddy, is because I like the stack of Herbert and Keenan Allen more than I like Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. I think that Luddy has more depth at the running back position, which is huge, but some of his running backs I think might be a little bit touchdown dependent in Josh Jacobs. And for James Conner, I worry a little bit that Chase Edmonds is going to eat into his role a little bit if he comes back for the playoffs. So I had Pootie 1 spot ahead of Luddy in terms of who I think potentially can bring home the title. Still, Luddy in a respectable 4 spot is a very, very close threat, but I was flip-flopping these 2 back and forth multiple times. And then 5 and 6, I think I had pretty clearly. Ross has a dangerous team. It's just curious with how his team is going to be doing health-wise. DeAndre Swift is down with the shoulder stinger, I believe, but should potentially be back for the fantasy playoffs. But like in the Thanksgiving game, if he has hit bad one time, he's potentially down again. So it'll be very interesting to see how Debo comes back as well. Soft tissue injuries, I believe once they get injured once, there's a higher chance of them recurring. hence in case Julio Jones, as a Titans fan, he had a hamstring pull one time and it kept recurring. And so you need to make sure you come back at the right time. And so that'll be interesting to see what happens with Debo, who's obviously Ross's number one receiver. And Axman, I have as the least likely team to bring home the title if he's to make the Yarsky. And it's kind of just rests on the back of Saquon Barkley. I don't think he's been the elite running back this year. I think he has a chance to eventually become an elite player again, but he just doesn't have it this year. And I don't know if it's going to work with the Giants because it's just an absolute mess. They're trying to do everything that you can. So, 1 second, need to have a drink. Woo. Yeah, people don't tell you how dry your mouth gets if you talk on nonstop the whole entire time. But as a little preview, the outro, because when people are listening, it's either Iowa State, Iowa Day, basketball, or it's the eve of it. But we're going to be chugging a little beer here at the very end of the pod to celebrate a successful year of the YarskCap. But that is all to come. Natural Light, the best sponsor in the world, boys. All right. Sorry for that little dovetail there, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do, damn it. Okay. Oh, yes. Last comments on Josh's team. Waller, no one knows what the deal is with him, if he's going to be coming back. It's going to be very important, I think, for him to come back if Josh wants any shot at the title. I do like him having the backup of Foster Moreau, but it's all about making sure you watch those lineups and following Twitter to make sure you know when he is or isn't playing. And admittedly, Josh hasn't been the best at that. I know he traded for Sony Michel last week, which I personally love the move. I thought it was a great move for Josh, and wasn't paying attention that everyone was saying beforehand that Darrell Henderson wasn't really going to be playing that game. It was going to be all Sony Michel, but Josh didn't start him. Lucky for him, it didn't really matter because it wouldn't have changed the result. But I mean, if we're close and things went to a tiebreaker of total points, those will be points that he wish he had. But you know what? That is what it is. So that's what I have for the bottom six in terms of the actual power rankings in terms of who I think can win the championship. So nothing actually changed, but know that these two I actually flipped back and forth 2 and 3 times. So these two I think are interchangeable. And I think really they're on the same tier as Zach and myself, but with me projecting me and Zach to get the bye gives us a little edge right there. For the bottom 4, in terms of actual power rankings, in terms of who I think is going to lose the Sacco, I have Schultes in the same spot here, and I actually have Built in the 8th spot. So Schultes overall, I think he's right on the cusp of trying to win it this year. I project him winning this week. His team is heavily reliant on the Bucks with Leonard Fournette, Gronk, and Mike Evans. And he's had some bad injury luck. I know Adam Thielen is out. DeAndre Hopkins has been out before, but it's hopefully looking like Alvin Kamara is going to come back. And I think having Kamara come back along with all the Bucks players and DeAndre Hopkins, I just don't foresee that being a team that's going to lose the Sacco, which is the worst punishment you could have. Next, I kind of have Bill's team in the 8th spot, and looking at his team, I guess I'm going to showcase a little bit just what the roster I'm looking at so people can get an idea. Overall, I like that Bill has Josh Allen. He's a top 2 or 3 wide receiver or quarterback every single week. Najee Harris, even though he slowed his roll recently, he's still a very, very good running back and is going to be a safe value. And so I like him overall. And RB2 is admittedly his weak spot, but he has some potential guys coming back. Miles Sanders could be back because there's a 2-week layoff until the Sacco starts. And same with Michael Carter. And in the event that they don't, Ramondre Stevenson, who, if New England stays in a huge run-heavy format and Damian Harris's hamstring injury is a little worse than they realize, could be some value. But the main eyes to guy are Michael Carter and Miles Sanders for that RB2 slot. And then just finding 3 receivers to go into his flex between Cooper, Jamar Chase, and probably Michael Pittman, since Antonio Brown is continuing to be suspended for being a dumbass. So I just there's a little bit too much upside on his team to really be the Sacco loser. And so I project him in the 8 slot overall. And then for the 9 slot, this was the other battle place that I did a huge battle on. Who do I think should be the favorite to lose it all? I flip flopped these two multiple times. And at the last second, I'm actually going to give the 9 slot to the Tua time Sacco. So I'll let you guys, I guess we'll kind of touch base on Sap's team first because there was a tiebreaker on Sap's team, which actually dropped him to number 10. And I like the idea. I liked him getting Taysom Hill last week. Don't know if it was needed with Tom Brady, but I mean, having two good quarterbacks means you're taking away a good quarterback from someone else. So nothing wrong with that. Um, Overall, I just worry about the elite level talent on his team, which obviously you don't expect to have much on. But it all actually came down to what do I think of Ezekiel Elliott the rest of the year? How do I think he's going to do in the 2 weeks? I believe they play maybe Washington and the Giants or something like that, those 2 weeks, who have showcased to be, I believe, slightly better defenses. So Washington, Arizona, which I perceive as a little bit tougher run defenses. And it all comes down to how healthy do you think Zeke's knee is going to be. And I just don't know if I would want to bank my rest on that because besides that, the rest of his team isn't overly special. George Kittle was absolutely huge for him last week. The quarterback, I think, will be a strength, but really his other receivers, DJ Moore, the wide receiver, I just don't trust Cam Newton throwing him the ball. The Cleveland receivers have kind of struggled altogether. And at his flex position, I just don't see a lot of potential guys that could take his spot. The one area that could change Sav was I did like the pickup of Julio Jones. He's scheduled to come back this week and could be the number one option for Tennessee with AJ Brown out. So there is some potential upside. So kudos to Saf on that pickup because I know I was looking for him this morning and couldn't get him. So if Julio ends up panning out and becoming even an RB wide receiver 2 for his team, I think that would get him the edge over Jared. But it kind of all came back to what do you think Zeke's overall health is going to be the rest of the year? And I just didn't want to trust it. So I had Sap in the number 10 slot. And in the number 9 slot, admittedly, I don't love Jared's team, which isn't a big surprise with this team being 2-11. A lot of his running backs seem that he kind of are going with are potentially out of clock with Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift could be coming back. I guess really that's the only one. Darrell Williams kind of has time come and go as CEH has come back. The main reason I'm also not a fan of Jared's team is Chuba Hubbard. I know has tough matchups in the 2-week playoffs in week 16 or 17 going against the Bucks and the Saints, who have two of the best run defenses. I know Myles Gaskin also has tough matchups in the fantasy playoffs in week 16 and 17. I believe it's the Saints and the Titans. And so I do feel that Kareem Hunt, assuming he stays healthy, which is no guarantee, but if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a mainstay for one of the RB spots because of his work in the pass game. And Jared does have the best player in Devontae Adams. And another kudos pickup would be Pratt Firemouth. So this is one guy I actually had my eye on for a while, and I thought he'd been a great addition to someone's team like Pooty or something because I think he's a very good, solid tight end week in and week out and was sitting on waivers until this morning. So kudos to Jared on getting a good tight end there. But I think Hunter Renfrow and Devontae Adams have been some of them. Obviously, Devontae Adams is one of the top 3 receivers. Hunter Renfrow is sneaky consistent. And Pat Fryermuth is a bit above average or right at average tight end, which is all you can ask for. So the main thing Jared's team is going to need is just trying to find that wide receiver, really that flex spot, because I have Renfrow more as a wide receiver too, and that RB2 slot. Who is he going to go with besides between Chuba Hubbard and Myles Gaskin? So I gave the slight edge to Jared's team, but that was another really close one, and it all really boiled down to Zeke's knee, and I don't think he has the healthiest knee. But with that in mind, I've already probably talked long enough, but I'm just going to dive into next week's matchups that kind of people will be watching and seeing what's going to decide the playoffs. First off is Josh versus Kyler. So kind of already referenced it before, but Josh is the projected winner, and with the win, I think he will be in the playoffs, assuming Pooty can be Shane. Overall, it's good that Josh gets Chubb back and Daryl Henderson. Hopefully, he'll be healthy. Um, it'll be interesting to see how Dak and CD do against an improved Washington defense, but overall, it's more about looking at Kyler's team where Tyreek, you just never know what you're going to get, but he has the ultimate upside. And Marquise Brown just had a couple tough matchups, but really it boils down to not having Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is here. You project him, Kyler, to win this match. So good for Josh for getting the 1 week that Kyler doesn't have him. The other big matchup that has the playoff implications was, I believe it was, I don't even know what it was. Well, the other two that have the big implication, I guess I'll talk about them quick, was Schultz versus Jared. And so Schultz's team, I think, is admittedly good. Mike Williams is out right now, but he's deemed a close contact, so I'm guessing he will still play. Adam Thielen, you can easily slide him off the bench for Mike Evans, and Alvin Kamara is coming back. So I think it looks pretty comfortable that Schultz is going to get the win this week, but Jared really isn't playing for much. He knows he's in the Sacco, and Schultz is just trying to apply the pressure. But the big game that's going to decide everything is if Stapp were to get a win versus Pooty, it would potentially cause a tie between multiple teams where Josh wouldn't get the head-to-head tiebreaker over Schultz. And so Schultz needs to be a big fan of Shane's team right now. So Pooty falls into that tiebreaker at 7-7. But looking at this week's matchup, I just don't like it enough in Sapp's favor to give it to him. Deontay Foreman admittedly does have a good matchup against Jacksonville, so there's hopeful that he can go off for another 15, 16-point game like he did versus New England. But Taysom Hill has the upside, but you just got to hope. What could decide this game is also reacting to Schultz's matchup is Alvin Kamara going to be running in the touchdowns, or is Taysom Hill going to be throwing it? So that could be a huge swing in that potential game and hurt Schultz's team, but helps Sapp's team. DJ Moore and Kittle, I think they're pretty much stalwarts. You start pretty much every week, giving Sapp's other options. But you just look at the other side. Pooty has the number 1 receiver, the number 3 running back, the number 3 quarterback, and top 20 players at almost all the other positions. I just think for this 1 week, it's a little bit too much for Sapp to take the advantage. And given the projection I have of Josh and Schultz winning, Josh would win the head-to-head tiebreaker. So that's what my initial projection has. We'll love to see what kind of happens with the end of it, boys. With that, I mean, I don't know. It could be the last episode of the YarskCap. We don't know if Zach will be officially giving his retirement to the pod, so TBD on that. If I don't have a co-host next week, I don't know if I'll be able to do the YarskCap anymore because it's not nearly as fun going solo. So wait and see, boys. Hope everyone has a great last week of the regular season, and it's been a hell of a year to the YarskCap. And with that in mind, gotta say cheers. Go Clones, everybody. Peace.